On March 8, 2014, Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The Boeing 777 was carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Their destination was Beijing. But before long, the plane vanished without a trace. All communications were lost about an hour after takeoff when the plane was somewhere over the Indian Ocean. What happened to Flight MH370 is one of the biggest aviation mysteries of our time. There are so many unanswered questions and theories out there that it's difficult to know what to believe. So what really happened to the plane? Well, that's what we're gonna explore in today's video. We'll be looking at all the evidence to try and piece together what really happened to Flight MH370. Before we get started, be sure to hit that like button for more videos. Also, stick around until the end for some of the craziest theories on what may have caused this flight to go down. You definitely won't want to miss this. Okay, let's see what we can find out about this case. Theories regarding what might have caused the disappearance of Flight MH370 range from mechanical problems to pilot suicide. Some people believe that the plane was hijacked, while others think that it was shot down by a missile. Still, others believe that the plane simply vanished into thin air due to some unknown phenomenon. Although none of these theories can be proven, there are a few possibilities that are more likely than others. One of the most popular theories is that the pilot deliberately crashed the plane. This theory is supported by the fact that the plane was flying normally until it suddenly turned and headed in a westerly direction. It's also strange that the plane didn't transmit any distress signals before it disappeared from radar. If the pilots had become incapacitated for some reason, it's likely that someone on board would have tried to contact air traffic control. But since no such transmissions were ever received, it's possible that the pilots intentionally shut off the plane's communication systems. This theory is further supported by the fact that the plane flew for hours on reserve fuel, which indicates that the pilots knew what they were doing. If they had panicked and tried to land the plane safely, they would have used up much of the fuel trying to stay in the air. But since they didn't do this, it's possible that they were trying to evade authorities. Another popular theory is that the plane was hijacked. This is less likely, however, because there were no signs of a struggle on board the plane. Additionally, if the plane had been hijacked, it's likely that the hijackers would have demanded something from the authorities. For example, they might have wanted to ransom the passengers or ask for asylum in another country. However, the hijackers of Flight MH370 did none of these things. They simply disappeared along with the plane. It's also possible that the plane was shot down by a missile. However, there is no evidence to support this theory. Additionally, if the plane had been shot down, it's likely that debris would have been found. But so far, very little debris has been discovered, and none of it has been able to provide a definitive answer as to what happened to the plane. Finally, there's the possibility that the plane simply vanished into thin air. This is known as a controlled flight into terrain or CFIT accident. In a CFIT accident, the plane flies into the ground while under the control of a computer. This usually happens when the plane is flying in bad weather and the computer is tricked into thinking the plane is higher than it really is. Although this theory is the least likely, it's still a possibility that can't be ruled out. So those are the leading theories on what happened to Flight MH370. Now let's look at some of the most common questions people have about this case. Why did the plane turn back? One of the most puzzling aspects of this case is why the plane suddenly turned around and headed back towards the Malay Peninsula. The plane was flying normally for about 3 hours after takeoff. Then, for no apparent reason, it made a sharp turn and headed back towards its origin. Although we don't know for sure why the plane turned around, it's possible that the pilots were trying to divert to another airport. Unfortunately, we may never know for sure. Where is the plane? Another common question is, where is the plane? To date, only a few pieces of debris have been found, and none of these pieces have been able to provide any definitive answers as to what happened to the plane. Authorities believe that the plane is at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, but despite extensive searches, it has yet to be located. What happened to the passengers and crew? Obviously, The most pressing question is what happened to the passengers and crew. Given the limited evidence available, it's impossible to say for sure. But it's likely that everyone on board perished when the plane went down. When will we find out what happened? It's impossible to say when, or even if, we'll ever find out what happened to Flight MH370. The evidence is extremely limited, and the search area is vast. Nevertheless, authorities are still searching, and we may eventually get some answers. So those are some of the most common questions people have about the disappearance of Flight MH370. As you can see, this is a complex and puzzling case that may never be solved. However, new information comes to light from time to time, and we may eventually get some answers. Now, if you've watched our previous videos, then you already know that we like to take things one step further and explore some of the darkest, deepest, and most disturbing questions related to each topic. So now it's time for you to take a journey into the darkest depths of your imagination, because now we explore what actually happened to Flight MH370. Did the pilots commit suicide? It's not an attractive theory, but it's certainly plausible that both pilots intentionally crashed the plane. After all, they would have known that there was no way out once they made their decision. In this scenario, it's likely that the pilots were under extreme stress and felt like they had no other option. Perhaps they had made a terrible mistake or were being chased by someone who wanted to harm them. Whatever the reason, they decided to end their own lives as well as the lives of everyone on board. If you've ever seen the movie Sully, then you know that sometimes things don't always go according to plan. Even if you're the best pilot in the world, there are times when the only option you have is to land a plane in the water. And that's exactly what happened to Captain Sullenberger and his crew. But they were lucky. Everyone survived. That can't be said about the pilots of Flight MH370. It's likely that they made a terrible mistake that they couldn't recover from. Or maybe they were being chased by someone who wanted them dead. Whatever the reason, they made a decision that resulted in the deaths of everyone on board. What do you think happened to Flight MH370? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.